She's the flagship of the German deep-sea fishing fleet, the Maartje Theadora. On shore, the clock is ticking before the Colossus sets sail. The meticulously planned logistics allow no time for delays.
Time is money.
A fishing expedition often lasts weeks. The crew is a close-knit band of men.
Hey, my favorite fishing master.
It's life at the limits, and yet for the men on board, it's a dream job.
Then we can get back to catching fish, doing what we love.
Herring. The deep-sea fishermen call it the silver of the sea. The net is hundreds of meters long and the quantities are vast. Below deck, production is underway. The cold chain must never be interrupted.
It's a non-stop operation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
When the fishermen head out to sea, they don't know how long they will be out for. Conditions can be extreme.
If we have bad weather, don't touch.
Out here, no one can afford to lose control, no matter what.
How do I get 58 crew members plus cargo and ship safely back to port? This is priority number one, and I'm not interested in anything else.
The Maartje Theadora, the largest ship of the German deep-sea fishing fleet. Built for ocean-going service, the trawler is out in the fishing grounds of the Pacific for more than 300 days a year. At 140 meters long and nearly 20 meters wide, she's too large for the fleet's home port in Rostock. When the ship returns from her fishing expedition, she goes to IJmuiden in the Netherlands. But for now, the steel Colossus is in a dry dock in Amsterdam. She's getting a new coat of paint. Plus, any other work is being carried out, which can be done during her rare visits to the dry dock. Captain Gabor Döse is also in charge on shore.
We're having a kind of technical inspection for ships. Many things which have suffered wear and tear over time are being repaired. For example, the rudder. The tanks are getting inspected. We're checking them to see if everything is still okay. The ship's wall thickness is being measured to see if the steel is worn. Anodes are getting replaced, for example. On the bridge, several electrical units are being checked to see if they're still functioning correctly. This isn't always the case due to the length of the service, so the repairs are completed as required.
Even when the ship is ashore, most of the crew stays and lives on board. Only the work is different from what they do at sea. The Maartje Theadora has already been in dry dock for 10 days. She has passed the technical inspection, and it won't be long now until the large basin is filled with water. Many, but not all of the repairs and refurbishments have been done.
The protective hatch covers are new. Obviously, they have to be watertight. When we're at sea and water's breaking over them, water must not penetrate the cargo holds. Here at the front, you can see we've taken out both anchors, which was necessary to check the chain lockers to see if they still have the wall thickness. As well as checking the chain itself, which also wears over time. We've already lost 5 millimeters of chain thickness in 20 years. It's still in the tolerance range, so we don't need a new chain. This is a good opportunity to repaint the chain markers. When I'm casting anchor at sea, I know then how many meters I have out. The bosuns get the order to drop anchor, put out 3 chain lengths or 5 chain lengths. Then they can tell by the markers how many chain lengths are in the water.
Fishing vessels need sonars, otherwise they're literally fishing in the dark. Some of the sonar systems, which are the eyes below the water, have also been replaced. The high-frequency sonar is very important because we can locate the shoal first using the low-frequency sonar over greater distances, even up to 2,000 to 4,000 meters. But when we get closer to the shoals, they become more flexible and the low-frequency sonar loses some of its power to locate it.
And this is where a high-frequency sonar comes in.
New sonar systems are ideally always underwater. Therefore, they have to be mapped precisely.
We've got a plan for when we're in port and repairs have to be carried out underwater. Pictures are taken and recorded, so we can tell the divers accurately it's 4 meters from the back bow. We have 3 or 4 sonar systems, one behind the other. It's now the third from the front that needs to be repaired. We have plans for everything on the ship.
Ships like the Maartje Theadora have to endure a lot at sea. Deep-sea trawlers are built to be robust because anything can happen during a journey.
In the fishing industry, we're unfortunately always out in areas of bad weather. The fish are usually active where the storms are. Enormous demands are placed on the ship, especially in terms of stability and stress on the ship's structural components. They have to withstand a great deal.
No one knows it yet, but during its next voyage, the trawler and its crew will be seriously put to the test. There's a problem on the forecastle. The covers for the cargo holds, weighing several tons, should have been on board by now, but they're still on shore.
We wanted to put the covers for the lower hold back onto the ship. We can only use the large starboard crane, but it's broken. It's not going to be possible today, hopefully tomorrow. Tomorrow's when we leave.
The protective covers cannot be hauled up onto the ship using their own crane. They do not have the power from the main engine for this. It will be started up later. The hatches close off the various decks from one another. For safety reasons, the Maartje Theadora is not authorized to set out to sea on a fishing expedition without them. Besides, without hatch covers, the cargo holds cannot be fully used. The next morning, work starts before sunrise. The deep-sea trawler is set to leave the dry dock today. The crew makes its final preparations. However, the hatch covers for the refrigerated holds are still on shore, and without them, the ship cannot set sail.
We still have the hatches from the lower cargo hold on shore. The large crane in the dockyard is still broken. We've been told it will be sorted out today. They're going to have to come with us.
For the past 2 weeks, more than 100 workers have been welding and tightening up bolts on the ship. And some work continues up to a few hours before departure. Outside, something's moving. The heavy dockyard crane has been repaired and is traveling towards the hatches. Second Officer Willem Kuit is in radio contact with the crane driver. The first cover plate is suspended. The hatch covers weigh several tons and space on board is limited. Manual adjustments are possible while the panels are attached. Further down below in the ship, it's precision work. Done. Workers in the dry dock prepare to flood the basin system. Soon, millions of liters of water will gush in. The heavy anchors are now raised. The chains had been checked beforehand and repainted. The anchors weigh thousands of kilograms. They're a kind of life insurance at sea. Up on deck, the cargo holds are finally closed up. The Maartje Theadora is ready to depart. Now, the sluices are opened to flood the dry dock. The heavy ship is still on its keel, but in a few hours, the deep-sea trawler will be afloat once again. The Maartje Theadora is now floating in the water. She will be towed through this canal to IJmuiden. She will then be loaded up before setting out on the next fishing voyage. The officers ready themselves on the bridge. The first tugboat is in place. It will be secured to the head of the deep-sea trawler. To do so, the ship must negotiate the narrow space on the starboard side, a gap of a few centimeters. At the stern, the second tugboat has arrived. It will maintain the formation on course from the rear. On the starboard side, tugboat number 1 squeezes its way further to the front of the trawler, a tricky and daring feat.
This isn't something every tugboat captain can do. It's a nice move on the part of the captain to try this because he likely had just 5 or 6 centimeters. It was tight, but we're very grateful for this.
The deckhands from the Maartje Theadora throw tethers to the tugboat to replace the ropes with. The link is also established to the tugboat at the stern. The maneuver can begin. The journey to Emoden will take around 5 hours. It's windy, and because she's empty, the Maartje Theadora surges up out of the water. The tugboats secure the ship in the narrow channel. The captain himself can do very little. He can only provide some assistance with the rudder, but the tugboats must do the main job. Up to now, only one engine has been running at low speed, but soon these heavy main engines will provide the propulsion. Only the navigation lock still separates the Maartje Theadora from her home port. The last mile. The deep-sea trawler reaches Emoden.
We're now on the quayside and we can start to add equipment. We take boxes and pallets on board and the nets, of course, and otter boards. Hopefully we can get things sorted quickly in the next couple of days or so.
And then?
And then we'll be off. Then we can get back to catching fish, doing what we love.
The following morning, Germany's biggest fishing vessel is berthed in the Dutch port. The ship is now getting equipped for its next fishing voyage. On the bridge, the crew lists are checked in case of emergency.
It's a kind of notice for the entire crew, enabling them to see who has been allocated which station or role. In case of an emergency, man overboard and fire, for example, would be general alarm. Should someone be unaccounted for, this doesn't mean that they're automatically overboard or no one has seen this person in the past 12 hours. So we'd also trigger a general alarm in this instance. We do a count on bow deck, see if he's really there. Is he likely asleep? Is he lying injured in a corner someplace? This has to be resolved. Or, should it ever occur, abandon ship, which hopefully never happens.
Outside, the pallets arrive, more than 4,000 in total. The frozen fish will later be stored on these. Even ashore, everything proceeds at high speed and with precision.
Time is money. We can fill a truck of this kind in 5 minutes. We'll be done removing the pallets in 1.5 hours.
On deck, Torsten Bayer oversees the loading of the ship. As fishing master, he will be responsible for the fish processing facility and storage during the voyage.
We're now counting the pallets to make sure we have enough in the central hold section. We'll have a problem if there aren't enough. Now the pallets are going to the upper hold area and filled with the cardboard boxes, plus the film and the strap-X, and that's everything.
There must also be enough food on board. The ship will be fishing at sea for weeks.
The drinking water's arriving now, and stuff to sell on board. Chocolate, 4 boxes of Twix, 4 Kit Kat, 4 Mars, Bounty, and 4 boxes of Snickers.
Candy is important, but just as important are cigarettes. The mood will quickly deteriorate on board without them. The cartons of cigarettes are kept locked away immediately after delivery, in particular because they are tax-free and not authorized for sale on land.
The free warehouse is kept very secure. A regular lock and another one in front. The customs goods have to be kept safe at all times.
Alles gut verschlossen zu halten.
As in a plane cockpit, a system check is also performed on the bridge.
Einmal unsere Blackbox checken, ob alles in Ordnung ist.
Just checking our black box. Every fishing vessel is equipped with one, and it must be fully functional at all times. This is really important. It enables the fishing authorities to see where we are and what we're doing at any time.
Sehen, wo wir sind, was wir gerade tun. Ja, dafür ist das Gerät da.
The Maartje Theadora is about to depart. Her forthcoming voyage will last several weeks. The final pallets are being loaded. In a few hours, the call will be cast off.
I think we need another hour and then we'll have everything on board. Then it's just the garbage containers left and then we'll be ready to go.
The team around Captain Gabor Dröse is preparing to cast off. On deck and on land, the captain checks to see if everything is in order. Because everything is in motion at sea, loose items can quickly become a hazard.
Looks good for now. For instance, it can be both irritating and dangerous if we stored potable water hoses on deck. If they get washed overboard, they might get caught in the propeller. Or the cranes are not secured. If the ship is traveling in a swell, the cranes will lurch too and potentially damage the hydraulics. Everything has to be secured in seaworthy fashion. The ship rocks and moves and nothing must shift around or endanger the ship in any way. Everything has got to be properly secured.
One final glance at the ship from outside for additional safety.
I was just checking to see if the cranes are lashed and seaworthy. And of course the draft at the front, 4 meters up front. When the cargo's inside, afterwards hopefully will be straight. I'm going to leave the pier now. There's no turning back now.
A tugboat is approaching. It will take the deep-sea trawler out to open waters. But first of all, it has to be connected. The men pull a thick rope over the steel capstan on the bow deck, a feat of strength. Because of the tides, a ship of this size can only depart at high tide. Otherwise, they have to wait. No one here wants that. The trawler casts off, and the port of Amoden slowly disappears in the darkness. The Maartje Theadora is towed around 5 nautical miles off the coast. It then proceeds on a course towards Dover-Calais, a bottleneck. Stressful hours lie ahead for the crew.
From Amoden, it will be 250 miles to the fishing grounds. We're going to Dover-Calais, and this is one of the narrowest navigation areas in the world. There's always a lot of traffic. And you have to travel in a line. The area is located in the traffic separation scheme. It's a bit like a freeway. Everyone sticks to their own side, and it's actually no problem. And we're hoping to reach the fishing grounds in the English Channel early tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And then we can plan the first catch, with the hope of getting some nice fat herring.
It's a very early start the next morning in the galley. Marianne Scholz, the onboard cook, is in the kitchen every day starting around 4 a.m. to prepare breakfast.
I always start off by kneading the bread dough. Because we make our own bread on board.
an Bord. Alles Geschmacks.
A nice basic dough.
Weiter. So.
And then at the end, water.
Achso, erstmal loswärts. Ja, bleib mal schon.
Stay on channel 16 and then you can start.
While it's business as usual in the galley, on the bridge, Second Officer Christian Zonus triggers the general alarm. Everyone on board must respond to this signal and seek the designated areas on the bow deck within a few minutes. When real disaster strikes, such as a fire or man overboard, there is not much time to spare. In minutes, all crewmen, apart from the bridge crew, are gathered on the bow deck.
Tremenko.
Every individual is called by name and checked off as present on a list. This is the only way to ensure that everyone is really there in an emergency. The men wear helmets and life vests. Depending on the scenario, they may proceed to the life rafts. A full complement of crew. Second Officer Christian Zonus is satisfied. On board, security is paramount. Little mistakes can have major consequences. Instructions to the crew.
Sites now where you are standing. It's also the sites where you have to come. When we have an emergency, you hear the general alarm or abandoning ship alarm again, yeah? So that we very fast can counting the heads. I say it also for the crew what I know you know that, but also for the new crew. We have here our life rafts on both sides. On both sides are only for the life rafts enough place for all people what we have, yeah?
We have the muster list, which says what needs to be done if there is an emergency. In theory, it contains a list of everything, and folks are aware of this. Everyone on board ought to know what a general alarm is and how it sounds. This is why we always use it for the first drill, so that they know it's an alarm and they need to go up here immediately. We do practice drills for everyone to fetch their own life vests themselves. Always with a helmet on and always wearing warm clothing, safety footwear, so that if there is an emergency, they know they need to be here, they know to report when their name is called, and they know what they should be wearing.
This morning, cook Marian Scholz is not only making bread, but also rolls for the 58-strong crew. Baked with kilograms of dough and a whole lot of love. The meals are often the only variety the crew gets, so breakfast needs to be right. The German deep-sea trawler Maartje Theadora is on its way to the fishing grounds of the English Channel. The ship has since passed the bottleneck of Dover-Calais. It now steers a course westward towards the Atlantic. Fishing for herring. 6,000 tons will eventually be held in the storage facilities. The net is being readied on deck. It's around 700 meters long and tapers off at the end. And although the net is so long, in deep-sea fishing it sometimes comes down to centimeters. Using a measuring tape, the deckhands determine the points for fastening the sensors, which send important information to the bridge. For example, if anything has actually been caught. This requires the use of a pelagic trawl. It's dragged by the ship in open water and does not come into contact with the seabed. For now, a focused and leisurely atmosphere prevails on board. In a few hours, things will change. Christian Zonus helps to set the points for the scanners. He will later observe the catches from the bridge and operate the rig. Final preparations are also underway below deck in the fish processing facility. Very soon, the first tons of fish will be processed here. Any delay would mean a loss. It's an integral component in the entire operation and must be kept running smoothly. The refrigeration chambers are primed. The boxes of frozen fish will later be transported via these conveyors. Fishing master Torsten Bayer makes one final inspection round through his domain.
Yeah, we're checking that all the conveyors are working, that the domino we use to label the boxes is working. We don't want to come up against an obstacle in production with nothing working. This is why everything gets tested beforehand.
Several hundred tons of herring are to be processed here per day.
Those are the hoppers. We're letting water into them so they keep refrigerated. They come chilled from the tank so that the cold chain is not interrupted. That's the worst thing. Our tanks are full and our fish pump isn't working. At some point this afternoon, we'll have fish. And then we'll carry on, non-stop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The Maartje Theadora has arrived in its fishing zone in the English Channel. Soon the large net will be let into the water for the first time on this voyage. On the bridge, Captain Gabor Dröse has got the green light from all departments.
We're all ready. Nets are ready. The processing facility is ready. We've arrived in the fishing zone, close to the 0 meridian degree. Sonars are powerful. Just 1 or 2 adjustments to do. You can't quite see on it yet. I need some fish first, in order to tweak them accordingly. Then I hope we'll find fish in the next few hours and get going.
Outside, it's apparent why the English Channel is referred to as a freeway. It's one of the most widely used shipping lanes in the world. The density of traffic is clearly evident on the radar. There are freighters, tankers, and entire fishing fleets navigating and maneuvering within a small area. On the bridge, there's a permanent state of emergency. The technology assists the officers, but ultimately, they're the ones who have to make the decisions.
For us, it's virtually impossible to work for 12 hours consistently. It's not feasible. So we've reduced watchkeeping. We're now using a different watch system, rotating twice a day, to withstand the pressure and be able to do our jobs well. Otherwise, it gets dangerous. No one can chance it. This is my favorite kind of journey.
The net sounder is being prepared on deck. It indicates how the net is behaving in the water. Without it, the men on the bridge are effectively blind. Once the sensor is operational, fishing can get underway. The workers are seasoned. In the groups, there's always one foreman, the bosun. He stays in contact with the bridge. Christian Zonus is standing by. The second officer operates the winches. He slowly lowers the net into the water. Mistakes can have fatal consequences in deep-sea fishing.
It's so big and yet looks so small from here. We're moving a ton load here. If they veer out instead of hoist, then we'll be calling for the helicopter, and it doesn't bear thinking about. These winches can lift 50 to 60 metric tons. No problem for them, but no match for any human bones.
The size of the net's meshing increases, and there are also chains at the end.
What matters most is to keep a constant eye on the boatswain, at least. He's the one who signals a lot. Obviously, we also have the headsets, which we're putting on now, but someone still might not understand or likely not say anything, just point. They've been working with hand signals for the past 20 years. So it's always really important to keep the boatswain in sight. You know, cooperating with the crew to try and make their work as simple as possible.
It takes around 20 minutes to set the nets. Any faster, and it would increase the risk of accidents.
If you proceed gradually or sensibly, the rest of the crew see it in enough time and there's no need to stop. This is safer for them and they can't get caught or stuck. Good teamwork between the men and the bridge is always important.
Finally, the deckhands assemble the net sounder. The last few sections of the large net slide into the water. Now it's time for the very heavy otter boards. It takes caution and concentration to lower them.
This is a situation where you need to be very careful when we're rigging and stopping the boards. He's working very close to the winches, which are under great strain. So we need to work calmly and look exactly what signals are given. Yeah, so it just makes sense to work together.
The otter boards are made of steel. They keep the net opening apart underwater. Slowly, the boards measuring several meters enter the water. Fishing has begun.
We have now just put out the fishing rig, and we've got the otter boards in the water. Now we're gradually starting to put down the trawl line to be on a level with the water, where we anticipate the shoal, and then begin fishing.
Zu fischen, zu befischen.
Meanwhile, a glance into the engine room. It looks like a power plant. There are 3 heavy marine diesel engines which power the Maartje Theadora over the oceans, whatever the weather. The engine room covers around a quarter of the entire ship's length and several levels. Down here, the chief is in charge. As the only officer on board, he's on par with the captain in decision-making.
Chief engineer, yeah, it's the main purpose is the engine and the fish and the factory, but also yeah, we have to repair from light bulbs in the cabins, toilets, everything what breaks down, we have to repair. From the bridge to the engine room, the factory, everything.
Haman Shop knows every inch of this ship. He's unaware that he too is about to be faced with a totally new challenge on this trip. Everything is running smoothly.
We have 2 engines for main propulsion. We always use them, and only when we need more power with bad weather, or then we take the 3rd engine. They're all 3 the same, 4,300 kilowatt.
More than 20,000 horsepower altogether, a tremendous force. They're prepared for almost any scenario on the deep-sea trawler.
Most of the things we can do, and almost everything we have double. So if one thing breaks, we have a backup for almost everything.
The work is hard and demanding. It takes a unique type of person on board.
I always say on fishing vessels, it's a little bit different people than normal, because yeah, you have to work 24/7, and the job asks a lot of you.
The oil check is one of the daily duties in the engine room, similar to an automobile. But the gauge is a measuring tape, and instead of a few drops of oil, it's necessary to top up around 70 liters per day. Germany's biggest deep-sea trawler is out in the English Channel, fishing for herring. 6,000 tons are authorized under the fishing quota. For this, the ship will be at sea for several weeks. The net is in the water for the first catch of the voyage. On the bridge, Captain Gabor Dröse follows the fish shoals underwater on the sonars. The catch sensor beeps. There's a catch. Tension is mounting on board. Everything is monitored closely below deck, too.
We can see exactly how he is progressing with the heaving. Here are the trawl lines. At some point, the boards are sure to come up. The net will then be rigged and reeled up. I think it's going to take another 10 minutes or so.
The first catch of the expedition is being reeled in. On the bridge, it's clear something is in the net, but this is as much as they know right now. The net is 700 meters long, and the fish is right at the very end, in the cod end. Now, the otter boards are being brought on board. They need to be secured, a job that is not without risk. The working net can also pose a risk to the men on board. Now the cod end emerges on the surface. The rear section of the net is bulging with herring, many tons of it. The end of the net is pulled towards the ship on a rope. On board, the men prepare the pump. They secure the end of the net to the pump head. To do this, the men open the end of the net and haul it over the head of the mighty pump. Once the opening has been slipped over completely and secured, can the fish be pumped on board. Next, the suction head goes overboard. The work is exhausting, and the men are working against the clock. The captain observes the maneuver from above. He may be up on the bridge, but is not above doing such work himself. He has learned the hard way from personal experience.
It doesn't matter what ship you learn on, what size. But once you've stood on deck yourself, you know how it is, standing freezing down there, and the captain above signaling at you in a t-shirt. These are the intense moments you accumulate down there. Down there is not meant in a derogatory way. In the hierarchy, I think you treat the crew differently because you know how it feels to some extent.
On deck, two large hoses are now being connected together. They will soon be used to pump tons of fish from the net on board. The fishermen also let the pump's hose into the water, and the pump starts to operate. With more than 130 bar, the fish is now brought onto the ship from the net. In the fish processing facility, fishing master Torsten Breyer gets ready. The production facility has not yet begun operating, but that is all about to change.
Now let's move to the deck. I don't need my glasses.
There is fish, but for now, the quality is unknown. First, they need to take some samples. The fish are sucked from the net on board using a vacuum pump. Via a pipe, they are then fed directly into the tanks. The first catch is in, herring from the English Channel. The fishing master takes a few kilograms worth of samples. The remaining tons go directly to the fish processing facility. There are hundreds of thousands of herring. They arrive at the facility below deck via a chute. On a roller system, the herrings are sorted according to size and then taken over different conveyor belts to the processing area. The distance between the rollers increases in size. Small fish fall through first. The larger ones last. The fish are almost entirely in cold water so that they stay fresh. Via various conveyor belts, the fish are then fed into the hoppers, dip tanks. They're sorted here before going to the freezers.
It's mainly all about the spawn on the expedition, sorted out according to A, B, and C. And it's true, the Japanese go for it. It's a delicacy to them, and so everything has to be right.
Herring is especially treasured at this time. The female fish are carrying lots of eggs, and on this expedition, this is what they're after. Several kilograms of fish are examined from each catch. The workers cut open the fish to examine the spawn, in other words, the eggs, for quality and quantity. It's possible to reveal information about the entire catch based on early indications.
Here in the kiem.
Here into the gills, then you simply put it sideways. Afterwards, it's easier to remove the roe.
This is a nice herring.
It's a good one?
Yes. This is still way too small.
Okay.
Nothing in this. We prefer the larger ones. Here. These are what the Japanese are after.
All of the fish gets used, but the roe is the most lucrative. In Japan in particular, it's considered a delicacy. Enrico Storm is also getting ready in the production facility. The scientist is a guest on board. He too is conducting samples for the Thunen Institute of Sea Fisheries. However, he's not interested in the roe, but in the fish itself.
Our mission is to observe scientifically how the catch takes place on board and collect data. Everything that comes from the sea is documented and recorded. This information is then used to determine the next quota.
Wir dokumentieren alles, was aus dem Meer kommt, wird dokumentiert und festgehalten. Die Daten werden gesammelt. Das Programm läuft schon sehr, sehr lange.
The program has been running a long time already. Different countries come together to determine the state of the stocks, whether they're good or bad. Do we need to take action, issue fewer quotas, or even more quotas? How has the situation shifted? And this is why there are statistical surveys.
There's plenty of herring. The last catch brought in several tons on board. The fish goes on conveyor belts through the facility. The freezers are situated at the end of the process chain. The fish is fed via a slide system into the compartments, which are chilled to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The work carried out by the men is strenuous. As soon as they have filled one freezer, the fish is covered. 2.5 hours later, it's frozen solid. One batch will be sent to China, where it will be thawed, removed, and separated from the roe. But the first catch was just average. The news goes straight to the bridge.
It was good at first, but the last catch was a bit small. Just some junk. We'll go tell Captain Gabor, and he'll look to see if another place might be better. Gabor?
Hey.
Are you at the stern?
Yeah, what do I do?
The last catch was really junk. The start was great, but the last tank had less, just a whole lot of junk.
Captain Gabor Dröse has to decide whether to move to a different area.
Now I have to think. We have 4 compass points, and one of them was less than a gold mine. We don't know yet which one it is. I'm going to have to think about it now.
Below deck, the shop is opened. Once a week, Second Officer Willem Kuyt sells cigarettes and other items here.
Het is voor die besatzing natuurlijk, hè, die Leute rauchen.
Obviously, it's important for the crew. We have smokers on board, and everything is tax-free. It's cheap, so we have to watch out that no one makes a business out of it. But I know who smokes and who doesn't. I open up once a week. Then the entire crew comes to buy cigarettes, cans of soda and water. It's important for the crew, but even without, we'll still carry on.
Softgetränke und Wasser. So ja, wichtig ist es. Aber ohne Fahrt die Dampfer auch, meins ich. Ich meine, es ist wichtig für die Besatzung.
There's nothing worse than having nothing to smoke.
And what do you want, Torsten?
10 times vanilla, please.
And 10 packs of rolling papers?
Yes.
We have various toiletries, shampoo and hair gel, shaving foam, razors. It's totally crap if you forget something abroad and can't clean your teeth for the next 6 weeks.
Meanwhile, Second Officer Christian Zunus is wielding his knife on deck. If a nice fish is caught in the net as bycatch, and the stringent Nature Conservation Act permits, the crew likes to fillet it and take it home with them freshly frozen.
I've been selling fish in Warnemünde since my apprentice days. We had a family trawler in Warnemünde. The customers generally want fillet. It's the seniors who are more likely to take a whole cod. And you also need to be able to fillet for the exam. So another lunch assured for home.
Below deck, the herrings are processed and measured. A lot of information has to be collected.
We want to see how much fat they have. This is the fish fat meter. We're just doing the first sample. We'll just put it on here. $4.2. When they're spawning, they're not so fatty. You can tell when you touch it here. It's not so fatty. Ah, that was a male fish. This is a female.
The fat contents are very carefully noted as well. Down here, there's a lot of bureaucracy to take care of.
All the office administration. But what can you do? That's why we have our assistant, our apprentice, so to say.
Thanks.
At some point, you also want to become quality manager.
Yes, at some point in the next few years.
It'll take a little while yet. Yeah, he'll need a bigger mouth on him. He's going to have to holler louder. Not like Mickey Mouse. Shout at the top of your lungs so people hear you.
It's going well.
So do they know? Yeah?
Yes, they know for sure.
All right, enough said. Now sip of coffee.
Why isn't this working?
In the facility, the freezers are ready. The fish are now frozen in blocks. The cubes are separated using a large scraper tool before going on to a conveyor belt.
We have 48 freezers in this facility. And when everything is going well, we can do 74 to 75 freezers in 6 hours. One freezer has 1.2 metric tons. You do the math, which is 90 metric tons in 6 hours.
90 tons in 6 hours. At full load, more than 300 tons of fish are processed here per day. The blocks are packed in the Strapex room. More than 200,000 boxes are on board of the Maartje Theadora, and at the end of the journey, they shall all be filled. The fish is stored in the lower decks at a temperature of minus 27 degrees Celsius. The men pick every single box off the belt by hand and stack it. It's back-breaking work. There's a shift change every 30 minutes. There's no fish in the galley. Today, they're baking a cake. It's a tradition on board.
So it's Thursday tomorrow, and what we call Mariner's Sunday. There's always cake for the crew. And on Sundays in any case.
Cake for almost 60 men. That takes some doing. And when there's cake, people turn up early to the galley.
My favorite fishing master. Yeah, it's me. It's gonna be cake tomorrow. Exactly, for tomorrow. Here, you wanna have a taste? The dough? Okay, delicious. Tastes great.
Schmeckt gut.
Of course it's nice when folks come by. You can have a decent chat and goof around too. This is just as important as the serious work here.
Is it April the 1st or something? What's with all the jokes?
No, but I don't think you're the first person to turn up here today. I don't miss having any women on board. You can tell it's a purely all-male company here. There's not a whole lot of cologne being used. No one's bothered if you smell of sweat. We don't need a woman to do the cooking. Best cooks are men anyways.
Hectic scenes in the fish processing facility. Operations are at a standstill. A conveyor belt has broken. Nothing is moving.
I think we're gonna have to service 12 to 15 freezers. Almost half a tank that we need to service.
The technicians have stopped the entire facility. They need to replace a motor. It's a high voltage current and everything is underwater. This would be too dangerous in operation.
The driving gear of the reductor from the belt is broken. So that we're going to change so they can run again. Normally we try to keep running, but if it's not possible, then we need to stop.
For the first time ever, 20 tons of fish cannot be processed. The clock is ticking. In the fishing industry, ships and production facilities have to be operational all the time. Otherwise, they're not making any money for the shipping company or the crew. It's narrow, loud, and wet. Because of the water vapor, the mechanics are virtually working blind. Seawater and fish scales rain down from above. The electric motor for the conveyor belt is broken and cannot be repaired in a rush. Fortunately, replacement parts are in stock. The new motor is installed in 15 minutes, but it still has to be connected. Down here, anything not made of stainless steel will get ruined sooner or later. But so far the men have always managed to find a solution.
We changed the motor of this belt from the fish sorting machine. It was not running anymore. It was an electromotor with a reductor. We changed the electromotor and the reductor, and now it's working again.
The belts are running again. The fish processing facility on board the deep-sea trawler is back in business. The second fishing master informs the bridge.
We'll give it a shot to see if everything is working. Tank 1 port side is empty again, so we're starting the other tank. Okay, Gabor.
You do become calmer. The more often you experience certain situations, every situation is different somehow, but the more you've experienced critical situations, the more cool-headed you are. I'm not saying that you are totally relaxed, there's always tension. But you approach the situation differently. You're calmer. Logically, you wonder if your life is in danger. No. Then we can proceed calmly, and this is key. You have to know what you're doing, and if something doesn't work, it doesn't work.
The crew will be fishing 6,000 tons of herring. So far, the catch has gone well for the deep-sea trawler. But the weather forecast is getting worse each passing hour.
Bad weather's on the way. Tonight we're expecting a storm, so we need to get some stocks. This was also the reason why the quality manager called again, so we could maybe catch 50 metric tons extra to have sufficient fish to produce a pool and be able to get going again after the wind without any great production losses. I think it's going to be storm force 10 to 11, which is around 100 kilometers per hour.
The storm makes the work on deck even more dangerous. The men at the stern always wear protective gear. Helmets and life vests are compulsory. Nevertheless, if someone goes overboard at night, they only have a slim chance of survival. The deck is well illuminated, but at night, it's harder to warn the men on board about high waves.
You can't see much outside. It's more dangerous when the weather's crap. In the daytime, you can see the waves coming, but not so much at night. But I've never experienced something at night which cannot happen in the day.
Fishing operations on the Maartje Theadora are going well. The hauls are always sufficient to keep the production facility running. But with an approaching storm, the weather is set to get worse at night. The rougher the sea, the more turbulent it gets on the trawler. If the ship starts to roll, parts, such as the heavy head on the end of the pump, will be tossed around violently. The men are now fishing for stocking purposes. If the storm gets too big, fishing will have to be stopped. At the very least, the production facility will be able to continue operating later on. Next morning, the storm has arrived. Storm Force 10. The work becomes too dangerous on the bow deck, so operations are to be stopped. The sea is churning and the waves are high. Things are a little more protected on deck at the rear.
The wind is coming directly from the west, and this is the worst wind you can have in the English Channel. We'll have these conditions for the next 4 days.
A west wind forces waves from the Atlantic into the English Channel. The forecast for the next few days is poor. The crew gets ready below deck. They're going to haul in the net. The mood is focused. They're all old hands in the business and therefore especially careful.
It's always, because a lot of risk, fast and heavy, and wave, ship rolling, no possible control something. Deck, water on deck. But for people, it's job. It's my life. It's normal. But must be full concentration, of course.
On the bridge, Second Officer Willem Koit is in charge. From up here, he has a good overview and can warn the deckhands on board if large waves are coming. But in the worst-case scenario, even he can't really do much.
The workers on board must watch out to make sure no large waves are coming. They're standing directly at the water. It's important for them to be alert in this weather. If something really does happen, we may be unable to help. Anything can happen at any time.
Echt was passeert, ja, dan is er vielleicht dat is weer dat is niet heel verkund. Dat is natuurlijk dat daar etwas is was passeren kan.
The Maartje Theadora battles her way through the storm in the English Channel. The net is full, but the heavy seas and hurricane-force gusts are making the men's work more difficult on board. When the sea is rough, the net can suddenly lunge around and take out anything in its way.
Auf zee kan die mitgezogen.
In a swell, it can get dragged along by the rough seas. At any site. According to protocol, if we have bad weather, don't touch. Keep out of the immediate area. Only if they are rigging or de-rigging the net sounder. Otherwise, you have to keep some distance. Moving the net without incidents.
Slowly, the net is hauled on board, a lengthy process. Several hundred meters have to be reeled up before the catch reaches the ship. The men often work directly at the edge of the ship and are exposed to the full fury of the wind. They need to be quick. The focus of this expedition by the Maartje Theadora is the herring spawn, or roe. If the fish spend too long in the net and are crushed too much, this reduces the quality of the herring and the roe can be lost too.
This is known as shotten herring. It has no eggs in its stomach and is virtually worthless for us. We'll freeze it too, but it's not so good for the market.
The cod end is almost on the ship. The powerful pump has to be attached there. It can be a feat of strength even when the sea is calm. Right now it's stormy and the men are working against the clock. The net is full to the brim. In heavy seas, the fish can get crushed together faster, meaning that the roe or eggs are squeezed out. Slowly the pump goes over the rail, but it is not yet operational. Everything is swaying in the storm and the work is dangerous. The long rubber hose of the pump in the water still has to be connected. No easy task at storm force 10. The deckhand gets up again quickly. He's been fortunate. The hose is heavy but made of rubber. If a metal ring had hit him, it would have been worse. Outside, the net crashes against the waves and the pump is still not working. The clock is ticking. The deckhands have problems connecting the hoses on board with the pump in the water. The heavy sea moves in from behind and the wind comes from the side.
The sea is tugging at the net. It automatically creates greater force. If it jams, your fingers could get stuck and you can come to great harm.
Great harm, in the form of serious injuries, does happen every once in a while. Finally, the deckhands manage to connect the two hoses. Time is of the essence. One deckhand starts up the pump, creating a huge vacuum. Now the hose goes over the rail completely. The upper end of the hose tightens itself in the thread. Slowly, the net is pulled on board so that more fish come towards the pump. As always, it's a waiting game. You can often tell the quantity on the water surface. Others will decide on the quality later on. Was the herring maybe too long in the net, and have many of the valuable eggs already been lost?
This was a good haul. We've caught approximately 45 metric tons. And 13 to 14% of the fish in the first tank had eggs in their stomachs. We can be happy with this.
Deep sea fishing often takes place in bad weather and rough seas. The deckhands are used to a lot, and they are also well paid. It's a multi-million-dollar business, but the safety of the crew comes ahead of profit.
Materials and people are under tremendous strain, and the risk of an injury increases greatly in bad weather. If no improvement in the weather is forecasted, I think then it's better to wait and set off in 12 hours' time to go after the next catch, to be on the safe side. There are always risks, but the risk is minimized.
The captain gives the command to cease fishing. The risk to the crew outside on deck is too great. In the fish processing facility, fishing master Torsten Bayer is doing his rounds. He too notices the effects of the storm.
The fish is all done now. The weather was bad. We've processed everything. And now we're using the time to get all the freezers empty and rinse them down because everything is so iced up. As a rule, after 100,000 packs, we will vacate them and get them clear of ice. Before we do the first catch again, we have to refrigerate the fish for a few hours again, 4 to 5 hours, and then we can begin production again. But that happens anytime there's bad weather on a trip. Walking through the facility to check things out, to see if people are still doing their job, cleaning up. Not that they're all standing around picking their nose, no? We have to check. Sometimes they like to stand around and have a chat.
The weather clears and the Maartje Theadora can resume fishing. In the fish processing facility, the belts are running again and production continues. More than 150,000 boxes of frozen herring are now piled up in the storage space. And there's more every hour. The men on board work in shifts around the clock. The captain has found a perfect fishing zone, and the quality of the fish is excellent. This attracts the other boats in the vicinity.
It's only natural. If you're sitting on a gold mine, you're likely not going to be so quick to say so and, of course, look on a bit grimly if another ship or 2 or 3 appear on the scene. But this is fishing after all. If you're sitting on a small gold mine, you're only going to have it for yourself for a couple of days. The others will start to wonder when you're not saying much and say, man, they're being quiet today. Then they'll appear and take a look, and that's how it is.
The trawler must always be kept in excellent condition, so engineer Jacob Hameteman climbs into one of the funnels.
Now, so now we take the electromotor out of the funnel. Now we are going to look for the type, because we have a few different types on the fence. And then we look if we have a spare one, then we put it back. Otherwise we have to order another one.
Inside the ship's hold, in and around the machine and funnel, routes are steep, winding, and very narrow. It's loud and hot. The electric motor cover weighs more than 100 kilograms. Without a pulley block, nothing can be done. The electric motor itself is also heavy and bulky. There is now a descent of several stories. The pulley block is mobile and can be reattached on any deck. But this only works in a horizontal position. It's a case of muscle power for forward movement. The final part. The 2 engineers have nearly done it.
First we thought the hardest part was take off the electromotor of the fan, but actually the hardest part was to take it out of the funnel.
It's business as usual in the fish processing facility. They're freezing the fish. Here too, things break from time to time, but rarely in a dramatic way.
It's broken. We'll check if we have another. Do we have any more? Yeah, around the corner. So here's your new board. Here you go.
And sometimes things go astray. The fishing master provides supplies and notes them down.
Number 4.
Yeah, number 10.
You're welcome. Write this down. Otherwise, he'll be here again in the morning wanting more gloves. You always have to keep your eyes on things here.
Meanwhile, on the bridge, an injury. The assistant cook has sustained a deep cut in the kitchen and must be attended to.
You can only use the spoon from now on. Otherwise, it's too dangerous for him.
There is a small hospital on the ship, which has painkillers and other medical supplies to treat cuts and other injuries. The captain has a great deal of responsibility and plays many roles on board.
It was just a minor cut. We've seen other stuff on board. Generally, we can do a lot ourselves. We've had more major injuries before, and we've stitched them up or closed them with clips. Sometimes someone might get an abscess that needs opening. We lance it. We prefer to stitch up a wound rather than ruin something. Lancing is never pleasant, but we sort it. Only in the event of emergencies where there is danger to life do we seek external help and get a helicopter. Enjoy your work.
For the cook, losing his assistant means even more work. And on board the deep-sea trawler, one kind of evening meal is not enough.
We have 7 different nationalities on board. Some of them are Muslims. I'm preparing rolled roast lamb for them because they don't eat pork. Actually, I'm right on track. As a cook, you have to be able to multitask. Something us men are often accused of not being able to do. But as a cook, you have to.
Multitasking. There are almost 60 crew members on board the Maartje Theadora. All are specialists in their field, and for the most part, their work is far from easy. Deep-sea fishing is a vocation that takes you to your limits, and sometimes even beyond. The engine room. 3 heavy diesel engines provide a huge output. Everything is constructed in such a way that some areas can only be accessed via small tunnels. It's hot and loud down here. Things are very different in the facility. Here, there's a lot of water and it's cold. Fresh fish is constantly being added to the freezers. The job on deck. Tough work in any weather. The crew needs to have a sense for the wind and the sea. Sometimes a split-second response is needed. In rough seas, the net can suddenly start moving uncontrollably. The forces at work here are tremendous. The navigators are standing on the bridge. In particular, in an area such as the English Channel, they're fully focused. Traffic is heavy. At the same time, the net has to be positioned. Duties vary for all on board, but the pressure is always on for each crew member over many weeks at a time. By the 17th day at sea, fishing operations on the Maartje Theadora are progressing smoothly. However, the weather is getting worse again. The gusts approach hurricane strength. Still not an issue, just an everyday occurrence in deep-sea fishing. Almost 4,000 tons of frozen herring are now in cold storage. But then something happens, which no one can explain.
We have a major problem. During the search, there were 2 loud thudding sounds. This was followed by a loss of rudder control, so we're no longer able to steer and we have no rudder strength. I have no idea what's wrong, but we're no longer maneuverable.
Was da genau los ist, weiß ich nicht, aber wir sind momentan nicht manövrierfähig.
The Maartje Theadora is adrift in the English Channel without a functioning rudder system. Outside, a storm is raging and tossing the ship around.
First, we need to find out where and how we can get help. We can't do anything else on our own. To put it bluntly, we've had it.
The rudder has failed. No one knows why. As an emergency measure, deckhands have secured the interior with heavy timbers. Because if these parts are forced upwards, water could gush in.
The rudder was broken off, or it's completely gone. We don't know that because we cannot check due to the bad weather.
Captain Gabor Dröse reports the incident to a shore station in France. They want to know how much heavy fuel is on board the ship and if she's in immediate distress. Outside, the storm is raging and the deep-sea trawler is unable to maneuver.
The problem is the waters we're in. Lots of traffic, strong currents and heavy winds. You can't simply say I'll just drift and see what happens, because you can end up running aground 10 hours later someplace.
The captain records the incident in the logbook. The second officer calculates the distance between ship and land. It's not a large area, and there are unfavorable winds.
I suspect we'll be displaced eastwards at around 3 to 4 knots per hour, meaning that we'd have reached the sandbank in 12 hours. We'll have to see what we can do.
The heavy anchors cannot be lowered. The navigation route in the English Channel is narrow and heavily used like a freeway. The deep-sea trawler is still drifting too close to the other vessels. One thing is clear, the journey ends here. The captain gives the command to cease fishing. At the stern, the net is hauled on board. From now on, the challenge is about rescuing the crew and the ship.
It's over. No rudder means no fishing. We can only hope that we reach port safe and sound. We haven't been able to fish the full quota, but there's nothing we can do about it. Obviously, this is annoying, but my thoughts are how do I get 58 crew members plus cargo and ship safely back to port? This is priority number 1, and I'm not interested in anything else.
At the moment, the freezers in the fish processing facility are full, but there will be no further supplies. In a few hours, Fishing Master Torsten Breyer will put a complete halt to operations below deck. Above, the deckhands prepare everything for a towing maneuver. The ship company has decided to send a tugboat for assistance. Everything must be ready by the time it arrives.
We've now been able to obtain a tugboat from Rotterdam. In the current weather, I think it will take a day.
The Maartje Theadora must hold out for a whole day. The ship is still not authorized to drop anchor and is drifting towards the French coast without a rudder. The deckhands on board prepare everything for the tugboat's arrival. They attach the strongest ropes to the bow, which will be used to tow the deep-sea trawler. The crew is in for a restless night. At 3 a.m., the captain can finally give the command to drop anchor. For now, the trawler is no longer in the navigation route and is far enough away from other vessels. But the situation is still volatile. The ship is now stationary for the first time, but nothing is guaranteed.
You might figure the anchor's out and it's all fine, but that's not the case. The current is 2 to 3 knots, and we also have gusty winds, meaning we're supporting to keep the anchor in one place using the engine and bow thruster. Otherwise, there's a good chance we'll lose the anchor. If we start to reverse and drag the anchor along behind us, there's a 70% chance we'll lose it. So we need to make sure we stay on the spot and wait for the tugboat, which will hopefully reach us this evening.
In Rotterdam, a sturdy tugboat has set off to bring the ship to port. But it has already become a race against time. Strong winds and high waves are tugging at the anchor chain. Every 15 minutes, the deckhands and officers check the state of the anchor.
We have 30 to 40 knot winds and a considerable current in the English Channel. Between 2.5 and 3 knots. Not normally the best conditions for anchoring. We'll just try and check the state of the anchor. Give a little forward thrust in the main engine to take the strain off the anchor. Clearly, the ship pitches in the heavy swell, and it is also necessary to counteract the forces. Not ideal conditions for the anchor chain. It would be preferable to drift, then drop anchor in this weather. But we can't do that right now.
The Maartje Theadora is 140 meters long. Even a vessel like this can be towed, but the ropes and cables must withstand enormous forces.
As we can't guarantee being able to take on the heavy towing cable from the tugboat in this weather, we are, of course, making our own preparations too. In other words, we're establishing 2 towing connections, one port, one starboard. We can then be sure that the ship is better to control in this weather. There's also cleaning work to do on deck. The net is full of shredded skin from the herring. It needs to be cleaned. Otherwise, the next time we put out to sea, the net will start to stink and rot. The same procedure applies in the processing facility. Roe and residue from the herring hull can be seen all over the place. Everything needs to be cleaned.
The ocean-going tugboat is now visible on the radar. It's due to arrive in a few hours and hook up to the trawler. Since the loss of the rudder system over 20 hours ago, the ship has been immobile in the English Channel. The next morning, Tugboat Duke has reached its destination. Its job is to bring the Maartje Theadora safely to port in IJmuiden in the Netherlands. What exactly caused the damage is still unclear.
We can rule out a hydraulic failure. I personally believe we don't have any more rudder left back there. But we won't find out until we return to the dock.
The tugboat is now on the port side of the trawler. The crew on the Maartje Theadora takes on its heavy shackles, each weighing more than 25 kilograms. Ropes and chains can be connected using the massive iron rings. The shackles are then taken to the bow. The tugboat gets into position in front of the deep-sea trawler. Over the next hour, heavy steel chains and a single steel cable will be passed from the tugboat and attached on board the Maartje Theadora. Seriously heavy work executed with millimeter precision. Success. The ship is secured to the tugboat's hook, and the anchor can now be hoisted. The anchor is up and the Maartje Theadora is in tow. Several hundred nautical miles lie ahead to the port of IJmuiden. With no functioning rudder and in high winds in the English Channel, it remains a risky trip, which will last for more than 30 hours.
What's important is that everyone is focused on the job. I haven't been towed a lot myself, but you do, of course, see the towing convoys, which are generally slower than the rest of the shipping, and you have to keep an eye on them to arrive safe and sound. The towing connections can break. Use your common sense and keep an eye on everything.
On board, preparations are underway for the end of the journey. They're getting all the rooms and quarters clean. In port, there will be a crew change, so the trawler has to be presented in ship-shape condition, even if they're not shipping out. Ships are manned even in port. Not always a full crew, but large sections of the crew are on board and, for example, take care of repairs. The second officer conducts his inspection round.
You're looking to see that there are no loose cables, that the sockets are okay, that the baths and rooms are clean, no water leaks, and everything's nice and hygienic. And if not, they have to clean it.
In the laundry room, the washing machines are running one final time. The fish processing facility is completely empty and clean. The cordoned-off zone will later be inspected by the health authority in the port. The employees in the fish processing facility are done with their work.
It's like what you see on screen after a movie, the end.
Looks fine. Tomorrow we can arrive with a clear conscience.
Outside, the otter boards are being collected. They will no longer be used on this journey. It's not yet clear where the next expedition will be headed. Most likely, other boards will then be used. They will be switched, depending on the water depth and net size. Small boards can't open up large nets. Large boards, on the other hand, can rip small nets. The Maartje Theadora is due in port in 12 hours, if all goes to plan. On board, 58 crew members and 4,000 tons of herring. The next morning, the towing convoy is nearing Amoden in the Netherlands. Now the pilots take over. On board, the deckhands prepare the pilot ladders. A few minutes later, and the pilots board the vessel. Five nautical miles off the coast, the sturdy tugboat changes the cable and is replaced by two smaller boats. It's the final approach. At midday, the Maartje Theadora is firmly moored at the pier. Her journey is over now, but here the work is just about to start again.
Hatches are now ready, cranes are ready, and then the unloading can begin. We've still got a few bundles on board which need to come off.
A precisely timed logistics chain gets underway in port to unload around 200,000 boxes of frozen herring as fast as possible. The trawler crew caught 4,000 tons. Even if there's no imminent next departure, everything has to be done quickly here. Below deck, the ice-clogged hatches have to be freed up using blowtorches on the locks. The temperature remains at a constant minus 27 degrees Celsius. It's back-breaking work for the men of the unloading crew, and a routine that puts huge strains on the equipment. 3 docks, one above the other, are virtually full of frozen herring. The deep-sea trawler was able to fish 2/3 of the quota. But first, it's important that the cold chain is not interrupted. As soon as the ship's hatches are open, everything has to be taken off in the shortest possible time. The temperature cannot be maintained for long. Unloading takes place between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and longer if time is pressing. There are more than 10 forklifts on the pier, ready to load the 40-ton trucks. Forklifts are indispensable on the ship too. Even here, everything has to be done quickly. The job in the ship's hold is dangerous and requires utmost concentration. Forklifts come from the side and hopefully no cargo from above.
Deswegen bleibe ich hier stehen. Okay. Weil überall anders fahren sie ja wie wild.
Not far away is one of the largest cold storage facilities in the Netherlands. It's the heart of the shipping company and a veritable treasure trove. And a cold one. Fish right up to the roof. The Maartje Theadora's catch is not the only one stored here. Other deep-sea trawlers are also unloading now in front of the cold storage. The pallets are brought inside through an airlock door. This saves time and notably energy because no warm air can penetrate inside. Inside, it's minus 27 degrees Celsius. The forklift trucks are heated and located in the depot all day long. The ceiling is 25 meters high, and the forklift drivers are informed about the locations of the goods via a computer. Efficient and problem-free logistics.
The entire warehouse contains 16,400 pallets, which is around 855,000 boxes. We can move these around, the benefit being we can arrange more pallets on 1 square meter.
One shelving rack weighs more than 400 tons and can yet be moved to the side with apparent ease. In the next 48 hours, the 200,000 boxes on the Maartje Theadora will be put here as well. Before sunrise the following morning, a diver has arrived at the pier. Today, the objective is to determine why the deep-sea trawler abruptly lost its steering capability. The diver puts on a dry suit and is unaffected by the cold water temperature. With the watertight helmet and the oxygen tank, he can spend several hours underwater. The diver enters the water at 8 a.m. It's still unclear why the rudder system failed. A few minutes later, the first images come in from the live camera. The officers from the Maartje Theadora have come to see the damage for themselves.
You could tell that the rudder was missing. He was filming the rudder shaft, and you could see that there was just an empty rudder housing where the rudder was meant to be. In other words, the cavity where the rudder would have been inserted. And that some broken parts are stuck in the rudder stock. Nothing else is left.
Once in a while, unforeseen events do occur at sea and in deep-sea fishing. The loss of a rudder is not one of them.
It's actually worse than anticipated because we had hoped that just one part would be broken. Bad news that the entire thing is gone. You can't just buy a rudder like this on eBay or Amazon. It has to be made, and the manufacturing companies aren't exactly waiting for us. It's difficult to get a new rudder. This is not an everyday occurrence. And even the diver who was here today and who's been diving for 35 years has not seen anything like this before. It's truly an exceptional situation. Overall, I think things went as well as expected. Waiting at anchor, the current. But we had hoped that the rudder would still be attached, that we could repair it, and be ready to depart again in 3 or 4 weeks. But this is simply not the case.
The Maartje Theadora was at sea for 21 days. In that time, approximately 4,000 tons of herring were caught. Total rudder failure ended the expedition. For reasons unknown, the rudder detached and sank to the seabed. A search for the rudder in the English Channel proved unsuccessful, but a new rudder was completed in record time. "14 weeks after being out of action, Germany's biggest deep-sea trawler will finally set sail again on a long voyage into the North Atlantic. This journey will last several weeks, without the loss of its rudder."